Hey everybody, it's Mr. Steve. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Otherwise, welcome back. We're going to throw a model, an OBJ, into the system here, and we're going to add a little life, a little fog to it, kind of something you would expect to see in the game almost whenever you're playing Halo. And we'll just jump on over to this render. Kind of basic. I'm going to keep it really simple. We'll go through this and we'll play around with a little bit of volumetrics, and we'll throw some lighting on this and then just do a quick render, nothing too special. And for those of you who like volumetrics like me, this ought to be a real treat for you. It's super simple, and this is literally going to take just a few minutes to put together, and then it's the tweaking that takes a while to kind of get the results that you're looking for. But without any further ado, let's jump right in. All right, got that fresh copy of Blender. You know what we got to do. Let's delete the default cube and let's drag an OBJ in and import that into our Blender 4.1 workflow. That's shade smooth by angle. Super cool. I like how that looks already. And unfortunately, even though I've seen it done in demos, it's not popping up with the texture automatically when I do imports, but maybe it's just how it's loaded. No big deal. So I do have a remedy for that. It's called the Shift-Alt-T, and then we'll grab this with the Node Wrangler stuffs, and let's go to the material preview and check this bad boy out. Looks really cool. I like this. Now there's a bunch of ways you could do this. You can separate by selection certain parts you want to have a volumetric effect. I'm going to keep this really simple. I'm just going to do the actual entire mesh. So let's grab a volume empty and let's drop that in the scene. I'm going to come over here, and under that I want to go ahead and add a generate mesh to volume, and let's grab our original mesh. So that little volume point that's in there will take on the form of our mesh. I'm just going to hide the needler out of the way, and then we have a little something started here, and we'll have to bring the density up so we can kind of see what's actually going on, and then we'll have the look here. So we are in Eevee though, so in order to see this, you can jump over into the solid view, or you can go to rendered and then make sure you set everything up. So you're on GPU, blah, 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 looks good. I would put like 200 samples maybe. And then for the viewport max samples, something like 25. I don't need to be rendering in the viewport like crazy, and I think that's going to be fine. Now lighting is going to be an issue. We'll take care of that pretty soon. But just over here in solid view, I want to get a good feel for how this is going to look. And obviously one big block of volume that looks like our mesh is not what we're after, at least not me. And so I'm going to add another modifier. I'm going to add a volume displace. We'll click new, click the double pill, come on down. You'll be in the texture area. You can choose anything you want. Now you can put on clouds if you wish and kind of play around with the settings there. You can go to foryou, which is probably one of the better ways to set this up. Go from intensity to position of outline, and we can kind of play around with the size of this and the foryou pattern and how that actually ends up looking. You can kind of make it a little bit bigger and then bring the intensity up or down and kind of fog this thing out and break it up. You don't want this to be exactly like the object. We want this to be like in the game. When you are playing the game, rather, you'll have this kind of mist coming off of the needles and maybe other parts of the gun, kind of the steamy sub-zero temperature looking thing. And in order to kind of get that look, you're going to need to make sure this is the, it's the look. Make sure it's the look you're going for. I think I'll go for something a little bit finer, and then maybe the intensity can be brought up just a touch, something like that. That's going to look pretty nice. And just going to go back and forth and hide that and tweak it and get it the way I want it. Now, as far as these other settings over here for the density and so on, you can play around with however that looks best. Whatever your machine can handle would be wise to kind of check that out, see how that's going to play out for you, because you don't want to crash. Make sure you've got a nice save point, so save your file when you're doing this. Now I'm going to bring this thing back, and the idea here is to have a render so you can kind of see how it's going to look. So I'm going to bring this in here and just do some very simple work with the camera real quick and kind of play around. Don't necessarily want that centered. I don't want everything in the camera. I want this thing to be a little more epic than that. We're going to need some lighting, and so I want to check this out in the rendered view. And so let's take the scene world and make sure that we've got that down to 0. I like working with volumetrics and things to be basically completely dark in the background. And with this object selected, let's make sure under Edit and Preferences that you have Tri-Lighting enabled. It's a free Blender add-on. And when you do, you can go in and throw in your 3-point light. You'll get a back, a fill, and a key. Now you want to be able to put these in a position that makes sense for what you're trying to show. Now they will kind of come in at, I guess, what you would consider somewhat of a nominal position, but I want some lighting to show upwards this way. And I also want some lighting to kind of fill in to the back area right here and kind of come this way. So let me Control 3. That's pretty much the angle I want. Maybe something like that. Don't have to be too fancy with it. And then I've got the, give me this one. I've got the key lamp here, and I want this kind of pointed upwards into this area just a little bit. And we need to give these a little bit more lighting power than 3 watts. So you can actually see anything that's going on. So you can kind of start off by giving it some lighting and then work your way up from there. You don't have to go crazy. I want this one to be a little more powerful, so like 500 maybe. I'm feeling 3000, seems good. And now for this one, I want this light to kind of create some shadows. So I want this to be probably 1500 or so. I don't want it to be too bright. Now I'm also going to control some of this under the render properties, come all the way down here. I've got color management. I always like to bring the tab up. It's so annoying that it's at the bottom. And I can start playing around with the exposure. I don't like AGX, I like filmic, and I like to put it on high contrast. Now, if you don't like that, it's okay. Kind of choose what you want. Now for my volumetrics, I can go to the volume. I can play around with the density. You do have a few settings down in here, but I'm going to bring up my voxel size to like 200 because I want to do like a little test render and see how this thing's actually going to look. And my overall density, maybe like a 5 or 6 maybe. It's kind of high. And I do want to actually throw in a little point light. So let me just see if I can center that point light. And we'll grab the cursor to the selected, jump back out, and I want a point light right here. Kind of bring that up, side view. Just want it centered for the specific reason. Right about there. That looks kind of good. And I can dupe that once I've got it looking the way I want. So I'm going to go into rendered view, grab this point light, and we could try something like 50. And I want this to be a pretty deep purple. In 4.1 here, I'm going to turn off the soft fall off and kind of bring up the radius just a touch. And maybe even 150 or so. Nah, I think we could be pretty good. A little lower, a little bit lower. And now I'm going to copy that light and kind of bring it down. And then come back out. Now these other lights can change color too, but I prefer to grab my volume and I want to add a material to my actual volume. And when you do that, you can change the color. Don't touch the surface. Just drop down the volume and let's bring this into like a mid purple, something like that. And I'll bring this all the way up so it's a nice kind of a glow. And now we've got this scenario going on. So I could go back to solid so it's not sucking up my GPU power. I just want to render this real quick. Let's see what my render settings are. Drop my color management out of there. It's 200, so I just want to do something really easy. Drop the noise down just a touch, and I'm just going to render this out. Now I can see that I've got all these little splotchy spots. I'm not too keen on that. I want that to be broken up a little bit more. I want there to be a little more distortion. I kind of like how it ended up here, but my lighting inside of this area is washed out. Don't like that, so I'll have to change that. And it's a pretty cool thing when you get in here. You can change the voxel size down and the density up. And technically, you can kind of make clouds with that. So there you go. There's somewhat of a cloud generator for you. But what I'm going to do is go back to my texture area here. And the intensity needs to be kind of played with a touch. And I need some more randomization. So I may change this up. All right, so a couple of things I want to do. Kind of stop the tutorial, just kind of plug around with this. It kind of needs a little more geo to work with. That's the volume to the mesh to volume is kind of looking for a little bit more. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm just going to throw a wireframe. I don't want to replace original, and that should give it just a little bit extra. I can go ahead and apply that, so that is mesh. I'm going to come over here to the volume, and I want to bring the voxel amount up now, something like 350, but of course be very careful with your machine, otherwise you're not going to like the results. And then I'm going to drop the density down to like 5, and this looks a little bit closer to what I'm actually looking for. And I want to get a little bit more of the needles in there, so I'll do this, and I'm going to do another test render and see how this looks. Now I didn't change the point lights yet, but this is a lot closer to what I wanted. I almost want like the curve. I want the volume in the curvature and the ambient inclusion areas. Like that's kind of the sick look. That's going to look really nice. So that's pretty good. Now I want to change the light, so I'm going to go back, and for that I'm going to drop the radius down on this, and I want to drop the power down to like 25, and I'll do the same to the other one. 25, and the radius to 0, and the soft fall off, you could turn that on or off just depending on how it looks for you, but it applies a fall off to avoid sharp edges, so we can turn that on and we'll see how that looks. I'll go back here. I'm going to do a save point, render that image, and we'll take a look at it. All right, so the fall off is a lot nicer in there now. It's not done rendering by any means, but this is pretty good. And like I said, I want the active areas, the curvature, the AO areas to have that kind of sub-zero fog, and the needles, of course, too. I don't want it so much around the handle, but as far as I remember from playing the game, it's been many years now, this is kind of more of the look. And if you want, you can add more lighting to this. I'll drop the blend file so you can have this on my Gumroad. And of course, I'll throw all the textures and stuff in there too, even though it's going to come in the blend file, but I'll throw it separate so you guys can have some fun with it. Other than that, I appreciate everybody watching. Thanks for supporting the channel. Yeah, smash that like, smash that subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one.